I've just come back from an amazing holiday in Northern California, and we spent a lot of the time staying with my wife's family in a place called Sonoma. We'd got other family visiting from all over the United States, and at the busiest time, we got around about 12 people staying with us. It was a great experience. They live in an amazing house, and one day I was out in the garden just reflecting. They've got this incredible garden, they've got several acres of wooded land, and I was there looking around at the beautiful views. They live in an area where there's low mountains everywhere. It's wine country, so as far as I can see, there's all these low mountains and vineyards. It was absolutely beautiful, and in many ways, it was perfect. There was just one thing that was stopping the experience being absolutely perfect, and that was that we had no electricity. For around about 5 days, we had a power cut. And the reason for that is about 20 miles up the road from where we were staying, there was an absolutely massive wildfire. And to give you some idea of the perspective of this, it was 70,000 acres, which is around about the size of the town of Warwick. There were 2,000 firefighters, 500 fire engines, and 7 aircraft, including a jumbo jet, who were trying to bring this fire under control. Now, the reason that we had no power is because, as a preventative measure, the power was turned off in the local area because a lot of these wildfires are started when there's high winds and the electricity cables blow down. So, as a precaution, they've turned the power off. 2 years ago, in the same area, there was also a massive wildfire, and they weren't so prepared for it at that time. A lot of people lost their lives. Thousands and thousands of people lost their homes, and whole communities were burnt to the ground, and some of them have not been rebuilt yet. So this time, as a precaution, they turned the power off, and also 20 miles up the road, 200,000 people were evacuated from their home. Now, it was very difficult having that many people and not having electricity. But I was reflecting on just how fortunate we were and how well we were doing. Because the night before, we'd had an amazing meal for 12 people that was cooked on camping equipment. We'd got a generator, so we had lights to eat the meal by. So I was just reflecting on actually how well we were doing when there were so many people that had been evacuated from their homes. They didn't know where they were going to, and some of them didn't know if they were going to have a home to go back to. Pretty much every personal development book that's ever been read talks about the power of gratitude, and very often you'll hear the phrase, develop an attitude of gratitude. And being grateful for what we have, being thankful for the things that we have in our lives, develops a sense of well-being and ultimately leads to a greater sense of happiness in our lives. Now, there are people who will say, well, I've got nothing to be grateful for in my life at the moment because it's not going so well. I'd dispute that, because if you're watching this, you've got an internet connection, you're watching it on some kind of electronic device. That makes you more fortunate than probably half of the people in the world. If you've got an internet connection, there's a fair chance that you had a roof over your head last night, and there's many, many people in the world who didn't. I'm guessing as well that you had enough food to eat yesterday. Maybe not as much as you would have liked, and maybe it wasn't the exact food that you would have liked to be eating. But there are millions and millions, if not billions, of people in the world who didn't get enough food yesterday. So actually, we do have a lot of things that we can be grateful for. A lot of books talk about developing the habit of starting or ending the day, or preferably both, by thinking about things that we have in our life that we can be grateful for. And very often the suggestion's made that we write these down in a gratitude journal. I've been doing this for quite a while now, and I find it an incredibly useful thing to do. So this kind of gratitude, reflective gratitude, is a really powerful thing. But there are a couple of things that we need to be careful of here. And one is, we need to be careful to not make this an intellectual exercise of just thinking in our heads, what are 3 things that I can be grateful for? I'm grateful for having enough food to eat, I'm grateful for my health, and I'm grateful for having a roof over my head. And if we do that, we're missing out on the benefits, because this isn't an intellectual exercise. This is about emotionally connecting with that feeling of being thankful for what we have in our lives. There is a second kind of gratitude, and in some ways this is the most powerful. It's called active gratitude. Now, we live at a time in history and we live in a country where we are extremely fortunate. We have indoor toilets, we have running hot and cold water, and we have central heating. It's not that long ago that kings and queens didn't have these luxuries in life. So, in a lot of ways, we live more privileged lives than kings or queens did a couple of hundred years ago. One of the potential problems of living such a privileged life is that we can become used to it and we can expect it, that this is how things are supposed to be. When that happens, it can lead to a sense of entitlement. And in my experience, people who go through life with a sense of entitlement don't tend to be particularly happy because life doesn't always live up to their expectations. A couple of weeks ago, I needed to go down to London for a meeting. I needed to be there quite early, so I had to catch an early morning train. I had a taxi collect me at 6 o'clock, took me to the station, I bought a cup of coffee and got on the train. Nothing unusual about that, except when you think about it, there's a whole lot going on right there. If that taxi driver was picking me up at 6 o'clock, what time did he start work? What time did the controller start work to give him the job to get me there at that time? When I bought that cup of coffee, what's involved in that? Now, I listened to an amazing podcast a couple of weeks ago about just how many people are involved in producing your cup of coffee. There's the person who takes the order, there's the person who's producing the coffee, but that is just the tip of the iceberg. There's the person who owns the franchise. There's the people who work in the factory that produce the cups that you're drinking the coffee out of. There's the person who designed the logo to go on the cups. There's the people who grew the coffee. There's the person who drove the lorry to take that coffee through the various warehouses and probably multiple drivers to get that coffee to its end destination. There's the people who designed the lorry that the coffee was transported in, all the people who built it. And when you go down to the fine details of it, there's even the people who paint the lines on the road that the lorry drives down to keep it safe. All of this to produce a cup of coffee for you. So when I think about it, I can be grateful for the taxi driver, the controller, all the people who were involved in making that coffee to get me onto that train and awake in order to be there for my meeting, and the train driver as well, of course. But active gratitude is not about writing this down the next day in the gratitude journal. Active gratitude is about realizing all of these things in the moment and being aware of them and being thankful for exactly how lucky I am for these seemingly ordinary things to take place. This isn't restricted to coffee and taxis either. You can do this every second of every day. How many times a day do you pick up your mobile phone without giving it a second thought? And the power that you have there in your hand, 20, 30 years ago, this was unthinkable outside the realms of science fiction. Yet we use these things hundreds of times a day and we're almost not even aware of them. When you start to notice all of the things that are happening around you, you start to think differently. You start to look at the world in a different way. You lose that sense of entitlement. You begin to feel incredibly lucky. In fact, it doesn't take long before you begin to feel like the luckiest person alive. How powerful is that going to be for you when you start going through life feeling like that?